as President Trump's policies continue to be unpopular, including the immigration crackdown playing out in Minnesota right now. Trump appears to understand it could cost Republicans in the midterms. He's clearly concerned enough to even suggest saying, let's not have them at all. In an interview with Reuters this week, Trump said, quote, it's some deep psychological thing, but when you win the presidency, you don't win the midterms. Reuters adds he boasted that he had accomplished so much that when you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt tried to walk back those comments, telling reporters Trump was simply joking. He was speaking facetiously when he suggested that the midterm elections should be canceled. And if this were anyone else, maybe it could be shrugged off. But given Trump's history with his push to overturn the 2020 election, you all remember January 6th, right? We have to pay attention to his words, especially since this is not the first time he's, quote, joked about canceling an election since returning to office.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections? Oh, that's good. We have to even run against these people. Now, I won't say cancel the election. They should cancel the election because the fake news will say, he wants the elections canceled. He's a dictator. They always call me a dictator.
We're back with Miles Taylor and Susan Glasser. Susan, I want to start with you. There was a phrase that was coined very famously by Selena Zito in 2016
not the name drop.
that I am not sure has aged very well.
Name drop.
And her recommendation was take Trump seriously, not literally. What do you suggest we do here?
Delete that quote from our memory. Look, Donald Trump is very effective at putting out things that he wants to put out that are seen as unacceptable by millions and millions of people. And he does this in part to normalize the unthinkable. And he succeeded because, frankly, if you told any of us our 10-year-ago selves that we would be talking about the things that we're talking about just this week, investigating in a criminal sense the chairman of the Federal Reserve because he disagrees with you, threatening our NATO allies that you're going to invade and seize part of their territory so that our NATO allies are sending their own ships and personnel to defend against the United States of America, threatening to arrest the governor and the mayor of a city because you've sent masked federal agents to terrorize their city. I mean, I could go on, right? It's normalizing the unthinkable. So we can all say that's part of it. Another part of it, Trump in his second term is very determined to take outrageous words and put outrageous actions with them in a way that he wasn't able to because of many of the constraints he had first term. So I would say, look at the fact that he's already put out an executive order at the beginning of this midterm election year, talking about how he wants to change the elections, take control of the elections. He's talked recently, just since the beginning of 2026, about his desire to get rid of all mail-in balloting. He's talking again about voting machines. These are very specific actions he's saying he wants to take. Now, the fact that he's not legally or constitutionally allowed to take them doesn't necessarily mean anything with Trump. So again, he wanted to seize the voting machines in 2020. He was stopped only by his advisors, and only some of them. I think he's already given us a roadmap for what he'll do if he believes that he's losing the midterm elections, which he looks like he might be losing the midterm elections.
I think it is everything that Susan said, per usual, is correct. And I also want to look back at this tweet from 2020, where Trump tweeted about delaying that year's elections. Quote, with universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good, 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. This was July 30th, 2020. The reason I want to look back at that, because I also was looking at some messages I got from Republicans that are very well respected, who I spoke with after this. came out. And what they told me was he is never going to try to delay the election. He's never going to try to stop the certification of the election. He is never going to do that, Eugene. He's just talking. We're just going to let him talk, right? We're just going to let him talk because, he needs to get it out of the system. And then we saw what happened on January 6th. And to Susan's point, he throws things out very publicly. And Donald Trump is someone who shocks the system, but the system should not be surprised because he over and over and over again tells us who he is.
Trial balloons.
All the time. He tells us who he is.
Yeah.
And Miles, now that he has seemingly no guardrails in the White House, Congress isn't doing anything. The courts are up in the air sometimes with how they're going to rule on some of these things. It seems like people should be ready for this, but I still don't think
they should be. They should be listening. Look, I am no prophet, but 2 years before Donald Trump tried to prevent the certification of the election, I said he is going to, if he loses, deny that he lost, and it will end tragically. I'm not a prophet. Why did I say that? Because I wrote those words months after Donald Trump said a civil war was in the offing and a coup was afoot if he didn't win re-election. Of course he was going to do something along those lines. Yeah. And, to Jackie's point, the man doesn't use jokes as jokes. He uses them as trial balloons. He joked about locking up his political opponents.
Right.
What was our last segment? He joked about sending troops into U.S. cities. What did he do all of last year, right? He joked about taking Greenland and swapping it for Puerto Rico. Where are we now? All of these jokes, his staff back him up and say, they're just jokes. They're not. They are trial balloons. So
and they become our reality.
We have to take him seriously and literally. Look, when it comes to canceling elections, though, I will say this. Donald Trump does not have the authority as president of the United States to cancel elections. And when he said to the New York Times earlier this week, he regrets not seizing ballots. Let me tell you something interesting about that. I have a little something to say because that executive order he cites that allows him to seize ballot boxes, I co-wrote it for the president of the United States. And let me tell you, unequivocally, right now at this table, it doesn't let the president seize ballots. It doesn't give him that authority. Executive Order 13848 allows the president of the United States to investigate foreign interference in our elections and to issue sanctions against foreign countries. And the flunky lawyers that he surrounded himself with in 2020 said, yeah, let's read this in such a way that it allows you to put your grubby little hands inside ballot boxes. It does nothing of the sort. So I will say, Donald Trump, if you want to do that, bring it on, because we will sue your pants off. And guess what? You can't pardon yourself and your friends because this is not a federal violation. It will be a violation of state law to put your hands in those ballot boxes. So we dare you. We dare you to do that. I hope he doesn't do anything along those lines. But even thinking about meddling, every attorney general in every state across America should have their lawsuit prepared to say Donald Trump cannot do this, and we'll sue him into oblivion if he does.
And the key part that you left out in that beautiful monologue there, Miles, is that the reason why is because states are the ones who have control over elections in their states. I see the tease up, but I don't even know if I have time to go to you. Do it, Susan. All right, you mentioned Fed Chair Jerome Powell. And something that Miles said during the break, I want to ask you because I thought it was really interesting because he said, "Are you all right, Susan? Should we just go to? Are you all right?" Okay, we're gonna go. Poor Susan's having a coughing fit. Susan Glasser, I'll ask you offline. Miles Taylor, thank you both very much.